Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Thrasher's Paradise. This week we have another special interview. Technically, it is the first Scottish band, but we have the Canadian member we're talking to right now. We're here with Robert Atlas Empire. How are you doing today, good sir?
Very well. How's it going, guys? The
Doing
Thrashers
good.
Paradise.
Yes.
Awesome.
The first question I have to ask is you are you as we talked about before we started recording, you are Canadian. And
Yeah.
what made you want to join this band from Scotland?
Well, that's actually an interesting and very long story. But I'll try to condense it. I was in Switzerland and I was a session guitarist for a band. We were on tour and I left the band and immediately got on a flight, came to Glasgow. I knew Steve already and I knew of Atlas Empire. And I basically just forced my way into the band. I said, "Yeah, I'm joining your band. I'll be in Glasgow tomorrow." And the next day I was in their rehearsal room. Yeah, it
That's
was like
awesome.
there was no asking, there was nothing, none of that. I just knew the band. I had known what tours they had done, and yeah, just got in there. It was great. I
Excellent.
think actually by the end of that week, I'd already had three of the songs figured out. I mean, none of like the crazy difficult ones, but like a good starting point. And by that point, it was like I had no choice.
Now, you just released this year your first album, The
Mm-hmm.
Stratosphere Beneath Our Feet.
Yep.
What was it like to get that released finally?
Well, so it was actually released almost exactly a year ago, about 11 months ago. So, and it was still 2018 when it was released. However, our reissue was just re-released by Wormhole Death, a label based in Italy, and we are very proud and excited for it. You know what? This is like the little record that could in a lot of ways. I mean, we when we did the self release, I mean, yeah, we did have high hopes. There was a couple things that got a little weird. I mean, we were offered a couple of tours around the release, which would have been perfect. One of them, the headliner dropped off, and then the other one, there was some weird stuff with management, and basically what it boiled down to was the American band was not happy with our European backline as a result of the kick drum being too small. Yeah, it seems like a really weird thing to be, weird about, but it was a thing. I remember getting the email back and just being so disappointed. We had like a week's notice to do the tour, and we'd accepted it.
Oh,
Yeah, we'd accepted the tour, and everything was great. I asked for the I-10, and then we got word back that the kick drum was too small. Yeah, it was such a weird thing. But
mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously, we'd been touring a lot. We've toured this record a lot, actually, to the point where it's getting a little crazy. We have a tour in 3 weeks of the UK on this record, and it will have been at that point, I think, 2 and a half months worth of touring on this record. So enough touring, a lot of spots. Yeah. Jobs are unhappy. Partners are unhappy. Band is super stoked though.
Yeah. I would, I would assume so. Now, you just did a little Canadian tour, I do believe, where you did make a stop in my hometown of Hamilton, and a few other places. What was that like to come back home to Canada and perform in front of your fellow countrymen with this band?
I love it personally. You know what? Especially Hamilton. Hamilton has always been one of my favorite cities. I mean, I'm a Toronto guy, and constantly when I was living in Toronto, I'd be like, "So how do I figure out a way to move to Hamilton?" And like said no Torontonian ever, except for me, because Hamilton's rad. I mean, you got a great city there. There's tons of great bands. Actually, our driver for the last leg of this tour, Sky Andy, he plays in a band called Voltang, which is a Hamilton band, and they're incredible. But yeah, tons of great bands in Hamilton. Great scene, great venues. But coming home as a Canadian is always great. Like that's like the only time I actually see my family. is when I come to Canada on tour. It's just been it's so busy, right? So our Toronto shows are always amazing. Lots of friends, lots of support there. And yeah, it's great because I get to show these Scots, what Canada's all about. They love it. They love the food. They love, everything about it. Basically, it's crazy too because we sell a lot of merch in Canada, which is great. Keeps us on the road.
Perfect. Now, did you have a big influence on the Canadian cities that were picked for the tour?
Yes, to a degree. So I mean, obviously, if you come to Canada, you have to play a Toronto show, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it's pretty much a given. I've always said that we should play Hamilton as well. I mean, I know it's really close to Toronto, but Hamilton's just great, and there's so many great bands there. And you know what? Like, it's quickly becoming one of probably my top three Canadian cities. It's the same thing with Montreal. I love Montreal. I've always fit in there. I do speak French as well, so
Oh, that's a
going
bonus.
yeah, going anywhere in Quebec is no problem, no challenge, and it's great. So it's one of those things where I did have influence over what cities were picked, but it's getting to the point though where that's going to be happening less and less.
All
Mhm.
right. Now, what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, in the sense that, a lot of it, like our first two tours of Canada, I mean, I'd been touring Europe a lot before, I decided to bring Atlas to Canada. And it became one of these things where I kind of lost the sort of feel and like the climate of, all these cities, all these scenes and what they're like. So the first couple tours were kind of testers just to see, okay, where's this city at as far as like independent music, aggressive music, anything like that. And then as you tour a region or a place more and more and more, I mean, you meet people, you meet other bands, and they tell you exactly, where you need to be playing, who's good for what, and yeah, and that helps kind of determine your routing in a lot of ways. So you kind of have to just like dive in at first and see what's up. I mean, sometimes, yeah, you play some awful, awful shows. You know, I mean, like any musician will tell you, like they definitely have memories of like just some of the stuff they've done. But that's how you kind of learn, and that's how you kind of get a better feeling of what's out there and where you need to be.
Excellent. Now, what kind of reception have you been getting from the release of the album?
It's been amazing, fantastic. Um, I personally don't like reading reviews. I'm just one of those guys that's like, well, I mean, I don't really care too much what writers want to say about it. And it's funny too because like some of the reviews we actually printed a shirt with a pull quote from one of the reviews because it was nonsensical, right? And we're talking like major international magazine, and they couldn't get a writer that actually spoke English or didn't actually know how to write English because it seemed like some of the phrases he was throwing out there just like didn't make any sense at all grammatically. He didn't really get to the point. But it's one of those things too where I try not to read them. Um, as far as the reception, though, I mean, it's basically what everyone tells me, my bandmates, because they read them. They'll get the quotes and stuff, and they say it's been amazing. And based on the emails I send out with pull quotes on them, yeah, like it looks like it was good. Looks like it was received very well. Um, and yeah, you know what? Even a lot of people that I know have been messaging me out of the blue saying like, "Wow, this album is actually really, really great." And yeah, we're all proud of it, and yeah, we're all super thankful that everyone enjoys it, and yeah, and keeps buying it. That's another thing.
Now, during the whole album process, from writing it to producing it to getting it mixed down to mastering it and to even get it out, what for you personally was the hardest part of the whole album process?
That's a funny question. So a lot of the songs on the Stratosphere had been written um, over the course of 5 years, or I'd say. So when I actually joined the band, a lot of the material had been written or had been, there were already song skeletons and everything, and all that needed to be done was, the finishing touches, stuff like lyrics, and bits and pieces here and there. Uh, so the most difficult part of the process, personally, I don't know. I think because I came in so late to the process, it was just making sure that everyone was happy with what I was doing and things like that. Um, and then the actual campaign around the album was pretty difficult because I was very new. I was very new to the band, but I'd obviously had experience dealing with this kind of stuff before. So it was more or less me checking in with the guys and making sure that, you know, the rollout, the strategy, everything around the album was worked for them more so than anything else. Writing it, I mean, we're currently working on another album right now, and that's flowing really easily. So I imagine Steve and Jamie, they probably had a very easy time pounding out these songs. But you know what? I don't want to say that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I can't read their minds, and I don't want to say things for them.
Alrighty then. Now, with you, as you just mentioned, you're already in progress of making the next album. How,
Hmm.
now, I don't want you to give like big spoilers, but I just want to know what's going to be the biggest difference from this album to the last one.
Oh, that's a tough question. Um, I would say the biggest difference in the way that I've tried to explain it as well to others is, well, so the Stratosphere Beneath Our Feet was a concept record through and through. From the ground up, it was very much a record centered around, basically like, the fall of society as we know it as a result of technology, and basically like the disconnection that technology is causing. This record is a lot different. It's less concept from the ground up, with each detail, each detail really, really thought out and put in, and more of a broader sort of concept, with the focus being more on individual songs. So as opposed to having everything kind of written out and sequenced out, and the process just in general of writing, like, a concept record where the concept is at the forefront, this is more about the songs themselves and how they fit a broader theme.
Excellent. Now, where do you see the band in 5 years?
Oh, uh, oh, the answer that jumped into my head, I don't actually want to say, because I don't know, I don't know, I don't know if your viewers would be able to tell I'm joking, or so I'm just gonna skip over that and say touring. We love to tour. We tour all the time. One of the biggest things in this band is just getting out there, pounding the pavement. We'll play anywhere too. That's the thing. I mean, nowhere is really off limits to us. We've actually had an agent. He booked us a nice, sizable run of festival dates in Ukraine, which was interesting. But he offered to send us to all these weird places like Turkmenistan and Mongolia, and
Mongolia.
like, yeah, like all these weird and interesting places that, like, not many bands have toured, if any. So we'll touring for sure. We love touring, and we'll go anywhere.
Perfect. Second last question. Who would you love to have Atlas Empire perform with?
That's also a difficult question, because depending on who you ask, I mean, you're going to get a different answer, right? Um, Myself personally, you know what? Like, I mean, I have a lot of friends, so it's one of those things. Like, I'd love to just go on tour with all my friends' bands. Um, whether they're bands I've worked with in the past, whether they're bands that don't exist anymore. But for a short answer, I mean, there was actually a tour that, I really would have loved to have been on that just actually had their Glasgow stop while we were flying back from our tour. And that was Thrice and Refused. And
Ooh.
I would have loved to have toured with those bands because they're amazing. But yeah, you know what? There's a lot of bands are, and to be honest with you, some of the best bands I've ever toured with are bands that I've actually toured with in Atlas, which is funny enough. We toured with this band from Texas called Televangelist, and they were unbelievable. Really, really tight set every night. Incredible band, the nicest guys, and it was just a pleasure being stuck in a van with those guys. Um, so that's one of them. We toured with some friends of ours called Gray Eyes, and they're an Ontario band. And
Okay.
again, it was one of those situations where even being stuck in a van with those guys was like some of the best times ever. So it's not even necessarily big bands. It's just, bands that really work hard, that are great bands and are a pleasure to be around.
Excellent. Now, the final question we ask everyone on that comes onto the channel for an interview. We call it the poser question. The question is basically asked to ensure that we're talking to actual metalheads because we want to be safe.
Hmm.
The question is simple: who would win in a fight, Lemmy or God?
Lemmy, easily. I mean, they're badass. Like, I, I remember he probably smoked like 50 cigarettes on the day he died. You know what I mean? Like, he's not like, you don't mess around with that guy. Yeah, I remember actually watching his documentary, like, I think it was a year ago or 2 years ago, and just like looking around his apartment, it's like, you don't want to fuck with this guy. um, yeah, it's funny too, because like, I actually went to the Rainbow Room, which was like his regular
Oh,
spot, and this was years ago. And I sat at that video game machine that he always played. And I just remember staring at this thing and being like, yeah, like if he was here, I would not be doing this. He would probably bite my head off for even touching the thing. So, it's again one of those things. Yeah, Lemmy, 100%. That's a great question, by the way.
thank you. I've never received an answer like that before.
Really?
Because, well, the actual answer is Lemmy is God, so it's a trick
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
But I love that answer. You're like,
I mean,
damn.
it's one of those things though too, where like, I mean, I don't know Lemmy personally, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure he had a ton of friends that thought he was like probably a very nice guy, a reasonable human being. But not knowing him is what's scary about the whole the whole thing. It's like it's the not knowing part where it's like, okay, yeah, I mean, and like Motorhead was just fucking badass
Yeah, it
overall.
was.
Name a band more badass than that. It has nothing to do with sound either. It's just like everything about that band. Like there was not a single aspect of that band that was weak. You know, you see a lot of bands too where it's just like they sound brutal, but it's literally a dude in his basement staring at a computer screen with a guitar, and it's like, yeah, okay, I get it, and I get your sound, but it's like there's nothing badass about that. You know, like but that's just my opinion. Take it for what it is.
And I will. Well, Robert, thank you so much for coming on the channel today. I really appreciate it. You made me smile with that answer. I'm not going to lie about that. That was just awesome. But everyone at home, make sure to follow Atlas Empire on social media and get their album on Bandcamp and Spotify. Correct?
Yep, that's right. And yeah, you can actually go to Wormhole Death's website and get the links from there as well.
Awesome. And until next time, keep on thrashing.